Hi all, my name is Miloje Savic and I will present you a life cycle strategic plan, chapters 4 and 7 for Menveo, which is a Novartis quadrivalent oligosaccharide conjugated Neisseria meningitis vaccine for the serogroups A, C, Y, and W135. So the burden of disease is usually approximated to be around 500,000 cases worldwide, and usually leading to more than 50,000 deaths, according to World Health Organization. Until 2004, mainly non-conjugated vaccines were available, but unfortunately they had a problem with the short-term immune memory that they actually elicit in recipients and therefore required repeated immunization. So the market opportunities were actually there to develop a long-lasting, to develop a vaccine that will elicit a long-lasting immune memory and actually protect humans from early childhood, because the mostly targeted population is actually toddlers and infants between the age of, let's say, 2 months to 2 to 5 years old. So now I'll move on to late clinical development. The trade name is Menveo, developed by Novartis Vaccines and Diagnostics. As I said, it's a quadrivalent conjugated vaccine that provides protection against serotypes A, C, Y, and W135. And the specific measurements for in late clinical trials like phase 3 and 2 were human serum bactericidal assays that is used to measure specific antibody titers in sera from patients in order to evaluate the immune response before and after vaccination with this vaccine. So the primary objective was to demonstrate that in this serum assay that the seroresponses to Menveo were non-inferior to already established vaccine on the market, Menactra, developed and actually sold by Sanofi Pasteur. And also secondary objectives were to show actually that to evaluate the difference of the percentage of subjects in certain serogroups, because as I said, this is a quadrivalent vaccine in children between 2 through 5 years and 6 through 10 years of age. Then to evaluate the geometric mean titers after administration on Menveo compared to the Menactra in the 2 to 10 years group and in each age stratum separately, and also to evaluate for each serogroup after administration of 2 doses on Menveo given 2 months apart and compared to administration of 1 dose of Menveo in 2 to 5 years old age group. So also clinical safety data in multi-study center and couple of studies, like they have Novartis performed 3 pivotal studies and 2 supportive studies all around the world. The pivotal studies were randomized, blinded, controlled safety studies and provide comparative safety data for the indications that they were looking for, as I explained before. And in a multi-center observer blinded randomized study in the United States, 2,649 subjects were evaluated for safety, and the planned post-vaccination period for each subject in this study was to study the sera levels in these patients, or actually volunteers 180 days later. The safety profile of Menveo in each individual study was similar to that observed by combining safety data across all these studies, and local and systemic reactogenicity occurred in a similar percent of subjects immunized with Menveo or the comparator vaccine, as I said, Menactra. Therefore, this vaccine was cleared as safe, since was actually essentially the findings were no worse than for Menactra, which is like a gold standard at the market at the time when Menveo entered the clinical trials. Also looking at the solicited adverse events and serious adverse events reported during the studies, it was essentially found that Menveo recipients were not significantly different from Menactra recipients, and that all these reported, especially serious adverse events reported, were not considered clinically relevant to raise concerns regarding causality between the advent and administration of the vaccine. So the summary as FDA approval went is that immunogenicity data from the pivotal and supportive studies indicate that Menveo is immunogenic and stimulates the functional antibody responses in children 2 through 10 years of age and adolescents and adults 11 to 55 years of age. Responses of Menveo in humans were non-inferior to those of the currently licensed quadrivalent vaccine Menactra, although in the pivotal study marginally lower responses were actually observed for the serogroup A. However, the comparator vaccine is indicated for use in the 2 through 10 years age group as a single dose vaccine, and the supplement data actually showed an immunologic benefit to recipient of a second dose in the 2 through 5 years age group and were considered clinically relevant. Therefore, the safety and immunogenicity of 2 doses administered to children 2 through 5 years of age were included in the package insert, with permissive use of a second dose in the dosage and administration section. So the FDA summary goes as well that actually Menveo is a meningococcal oligosaccharide conjugated vaccine. Solution is intended for intramuscular injection in 0.5 ml dose, supplied as a lyophilized vaccine component that is combined through reconstitution with a liquid vaccine component in a single dose vial. The license was issued in February 2010 to use in adults from, let's say, and adolescents from 11 to 55 years of age, and in 2011 the license was extended for infants from 2 to 10 years of age. So in Europe as well, the efficacy of Menveo has been inferred by measuring the production of serogroup-specific anti-capsular antibodies with bactericidal activity, and were used randomized multicenter trials. And preclinical safety data also reveal no special hazard for humans based on conventional repeated dose and reproductive and developmental toxicity studies. So the European Commission actually granted a marketing authorization valid throughout the European Union for Menveo in March 2010. It's also recognized to protect adults and children from the age of 2 against invasive disease caused by these 4 serogroups of Neisseria meningitis, and it's also offered as a pre-filled syringe instead of just lyophilized powder, and this pre-filled syringe can only be used in adults and adolescents from the age of 11. Further requirements were that Novartis will carry out studies to assess how long the protective immune response lasts in children aged between 2 and 10 years old, including recommendations on the need and timing of a booster dose. Also, a recommendation was that the clinical data provided in supplemental information demonstrated that Menveo has a similar safety profile and similar immunogenicity to the licensed meningococcal conjugate vaccine Menactra in children 2 through 10 years of age. Therefore, in 2011, FDA and also EMEA approved actually and extended the use of Menveo not only for the age groups 11 to 55 years of age, but also included availability and the safety of this vaccine to be used in groups of age 2 to 10 years of age. So now I'll move on a bit to epidemiology and pharmacoeconomics analysis, actually why was it good and what would be the cost effectiveness and benefits of actually systemic protective vaccination against meningococcal invasive disease. So as far as epidemiology goes, the reservoir is definitely a human population and transmission is usually by respiratory droplets. A temporal pattern actually occurs and peaks about in late winter and early spring, and communicability is generally limited. However, primary mode is by respiratory droplets spread or by direct contact. World Health Organization estimates that around 500,000 cases occur throughout the year and about 50,000 deaths actually per year. According to WHO, around 430 million people are at risk, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, that is considered the so-called meningitis belt. And it is, the potential of a conjugate vaccine program in Africa is expected to prevent 123,000 deaths by 2018 and prevent permanently disability in 287,000 children and adults, and approximately save, let's say, $100 million in direct medical costs for diagnosis and treatment. Looking around the world, actually in different areas, or let's say if we just divide by continent, we see that in North America are usually B, C, and Y serotypes prevalent, whilst in Europe are usually B and C. In Africa, these are like A, B, C, W135, X, and Y. In Australia is B and C, Middle East, A, B, W, 135 and Y. In Asia, A and C, and South America, B, C, Y, 135 and W. And usually for serogroup B, there is actually an X, there is no currently vaccine available, but actually Novartis has a conjugated vaccine against serogroup B, but I'll talk about it a bit later. In US, prior to 2010, it was like between 1,500 and 2,800 cases that would occur each year in the US, but since introduction of the vaccines in 2000, like non-conjugated, and from 2005 on with the conjugated vaccine, these numbers are really going down. And as you can see, that incidence by age group is usually highest in toddlers and infants of less than 1 year of age. So, invasive meningococcal disease outbreaks are associated with substantial costs to society, with high public health burden. And even though these outbreaks are rare in endemic areas, let's say 1 or 2 cases per 100,000 individuals, they can have very rapid onset, leading to sometimes death within 24 to 48 hours. The cost and the public health burden of invasive meningococcal disease is approximately evaluated to be around $500,000 in high-income countries, whilst actually these costs go really higher for low-income countries. For example, in Africa, meningitis belt, it's estimated that average cost per containment strategy was around $3.5 million on average. So, pharmacoeconomical analysis, I'll just took 2 examples, one from the US and one from the Netherlands. In both of them actually analyzed primary outcomes of disease, like survival without sequelae, survival with long-term sequelae, and death. Projected outcomes were based on the base case most likely scenario, and in the US it was followed the model of vaccination of 11-year-old cohort, and it was found that this systematic vaccination would prevent 270 cases and prevent 36 deaths, which would ultimately lead to overall cost saving of 227 millions, decreasing around 47% burden of disease. A similar case was found in the Netherlands, though the population over there is much smaller and therefore preventing around 19 cases and 8 deaths per year. So now I'll move on to Chapter 7 and discuss a bit of a marketing strategy, or actually the data and information I could actually find on various websites and internet resources. So the global market actually for meningococcal vaccines was evaluated to more than $700 million in 2009. The current leading product is the quadrivalent conjugate vaccine Menactra, offered by Sanofi Pasteur, which had sales of around 446 million euros, or roughly almost $600 million in 2009. And Menactra is approved and sold solely in the United States and Canada, actually, which gives slightly more advantage to Novartis for the rest of the world if they're actually fast to register and get approval. However, the European market, on the other hand, for quadrivalent vaccines is substantially smaller compared to the United States, given the different distribution of meningococcal serogroups and the availability of a vaccine for serogroup C, which seems to be also quite dominant in Europe but not so prevalent in the US, and also serotype B found in Europe. It is the largest prevailing in serogroup in Europe, but there are no broadly protective vaccines for this group currently available. However, both Novartis and Pfizer have serogroup B vaccines in development. Globally looking, infants are at the highest risk of infection with meningococcal disease, so vaccines administered to infants are actually desirable and represent the largest potential market with the largest benefit in terms of protection throughout the life. So Menveo was originally anticipated to be approved for use in infants by 2010. However, FDA requested additional 1,500 patient safety study prior to filing for this indication, which is anticipated to occur in 2011. However, unfortunately in 2012, FDA rejected to expand Menveo to infants and toddlers of 2 months through 2 years of age, requesting additional clinical data, but it was approved for children 2 years of age through 10 years of age. The ability to give Menveo actually as a part of the routine infant vaccination schedule starting at 2 months of age could be a significant advantage over Menactra. Annual sales of Menveo are kind of anticipated to be more than $550 million by 2013 following successful approval in the infant-toddler indication, and could even increase to more than $1.5 billion by 2015 according to some estimates. So, of around estimated 500,000 cases worldwide, main market for conjugate quadrivalent meningococcal vaccines is the US, where vaccination is currently routinely recommended for all adolescents in the age groups 11 to 18 years of age. And however, the US market is dominated by Sanofi Pasteur's Menactra vaccine, which was released and launched in 2005. Menveo, however, was approved only in 2010, so there's seconds to launch and 5 years gap when Sanofi already established pretty good market in the US. In the third quarter, let's say, of 2012, Menactra generated sales of almost 208 million euros, accounting for approximately 14% of total vaccine sales at Sanofi. And since most cases of meningococcal disease actually occur in infants, This population represents actually the biggest growth opportunity for vaccines. Consequently, Sanofi and Novartis are actually pushing to extend the age indication of their respective meningococcal vaccines, as recommended for routine vaccination of all infants in the US could potentially boost US sales for this franchise to over $1 billion by 2019. The FDA's refusal actually to accept the filing of Menveo for infants and toddlers poses a major drawback for Novartis, since Sanofi filed for approval of Menactra in this age group in June 2010 and could now pretty much beat Novartis to the market in this segment, which, as I said before, is the most important for growth in this vaccine group. It is expected that Novartis will resubmit its application for toddlers and infants sometime in 2013. However, the good news actually for Novartis is that they are already developing, or actually developed, a new vaccine called Coursera, which is a multi-component vaccine conjugated but against serotype B, and that was approved in European Union in December 2010 and is expected to be like a next big blockbuster vaccine in major markets like the US, Japan, France, Germany, Italy, Spain, and the UK. So from January 2013, marketing authorization was issued that's valid throughout European Union for active immunization of individuals from 2 months of age and older against invasive meningococcal disease caused by Neisseria meningitis group B. So, according to product utilization data, as of April 2012, Menactra sold, actually Sanofi sold almost 50 million doses of Menactra, compared to only around 2 million doses sold by Novartis of Menveo. Around the globe, around 3 million doses were distributed. And as we look at the US pricing, we see that in pediatric section, both Menveo and Menactra are sold by roughly the same costs and the same prices also in adults. Prices can vary pretty much in different countries. So for example, in UK usually the price is around £40, but it can be all the way to 75, which is way more than 85. $82 as recommended by CDC for cost per dose. Looking at the global sales, we see that Menactra is far out competes the sales of Menveo because, fair enough, they started selling almost 5 years before Menveo was released and launched to the market. So looking at the marketing strategy and actually some SWOT summary, you see that Novartis has its good, it positions itself globally as a very well recognized company. They have expertise in vaccine production, they have huge reputation in marketplace, and they are also developing meningococcal vaccine for serotype B. On the weak side, it could always be manufacturing facilities and lot-to-lot consistency, which has to be actually maintained, distribution networks, also marketing drawbacks, and so on. Opportunities are in well-defined markets and with the well-established position of Novartis. For example, in the US market, they only have, as for now, only one competitor, which is Sanofi. EMEA approved Coursera in 2013, which is a good news against meningitis serotype B. However, Nimendrix, GlaxoSmithKline developed also a quadrivalent conjugated vaccine, but it was not approved by FDA, though it was approved recently by EMEA, which will be also very strong contestant in the European market against Menveo. And then the threats are definitely seconds to launch, especially in the US market, FDA rejected to extend approval for infants and toddlers 2 months through 2 years of age, and this is a major target group for this vaccine. There are also some non-conjugated vaccines that are potential that can potentially take some part of the market, like A+C from Sanofi or Menveo from GlaxoSmithKline. However, new conjugated vaccines are probably more concerning for Novartis, like Menveo by GlaxoSmithKline that has FDA approval, and it's against meningococcus A and C serotypes, but also Haemophilus influenza type B. Also, EMEA in Europe approved Glaxo's Nimendrix quadrivalent menigococcal vaccine, and as far as Pfizer, they are also developing vaccine against serotype B, but they are in phase 3 trial yet. So therefore, in that market segment, I presume that Novartis is doing way better, and they'll actually have at least 2 to 3 years to establish themselves in the market before Pfizer's vaccine gets approved, if it gets approved after the phase 3. So as far as the phase 4, which is currently going on in the US especially, there is adolescent self-controlled case studies in persons age 11 to 20, and the sample size is around the cohort of 50,000 people in 1 year observation periods. Endpoints will include incidence of allergic, neurological, and autoimmune events. Final reports are expected in 2015. Also, pediatric observational safety surveillance study in children 2 to 10 years of age, and study population again will have 3 years study start and 1 year of follow-up, and endpoints will include incidence of serious allergic, neurological, and autoimmune events. And also final reports are expected to be submitted in the late 2015. And post-marketing surveillance in pregnancy in US Pregnancy Registry. Study design is a cohort studies following 100 Menveo recipients and women compared to women without exposure to teratogens or Menveo. And for the case control studies, the sample size is selected to be 8,000 individuals with birth defects, and controls are 2,000 persons without birth defects. And also results of these studies are expected actually in early 2016. So for the final remarks, I can say that Novartis was unfortunately second to launch quadrivalent meningococcal vaccine in the US, which really put this company in a less favored position, and they had to prove that Menveo was not inferior to already well-established Menactra. Further FDA rejection in 2012 to extend vaccine use for toddlers and infants 2 months through 2 years of age was a major drawback, since this was the largest target group, and Novartis is actually losing a market share to Sanofi Pasteur's Menactra, which warranted actually extended approval for toddlers and infants 9 months of age through 2 years in mid-2011. So pretty much Novartis is expected to resubmit for approval in this targeted group during 2013, and especially if they are really wishing to capture that estimated market share that's between 800 and $1 billion US. Unfortunately, there was no data available, which were like, R&D and developing costs for Menveo, nor return on this investment. However, I guess that with better clinical trials, especially in that mostly desired toddlers and infant group, if these trials were done more carefully to avoid this rejection by FDA and EMEA, which they consequently delayed 2 to 3 years of approval and marketing for this group. So I think that's the end of this chapter. Thank you.